So thanks so much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. Yeah, no, looks like a broad sweep of topics. So yeah, should be fun.
Cool. Well, if it's all right, Tom, the first place I want to talk about is how you got into accounting in the first place. So, like, I think you've got a really rich background, and but I couldn't find anything deeper in there that connected you to accounting. So, keen to understand like how you came into accounting and accounting tech.
Yeah, nice. So I came through in the classic way. Really, one of my parents was an accountant. So yeah, my mum worked as an accountant for the council. So after me and my brother and my sister were all sort of able to walk and talk, she went back to work and sort of qualified as an accountant. And so, yeah, there was always, for some reason, there were always jobs going at Bath and North East Somerset Council. So, yeah, every college holiday, every uni holiday, in I went. And like from like 16 onwards, I was working in their finance department, beavering away. I mean, you might call it nepotism. I don't know. You hear about the nepo babies in sort of film and television, and that are not quite as glamorous. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I wasn't quite sure. Didn't apply myself particularly well at school. Writing was the only thing I really wanted to do. Took an aptitude towards. But I didn't really know or understand how to make any money out of that. So I started training as an accountant when I left uni at in the finance department for a well-known kitchens company. That didn't go so well. It was one of those where I was like training, and I did the first couple of months and was like, okay, great. What's next? It's like, no, this is kind of it for the time being. Just keep your head down. You'll be fine. Yeah, that kind of filled me with dread, to be honest. And yeah, I really, really wasn't particularly enamored with that idea. So, I mean, one of the ladies in the finance department was from Beijing. So I went off, like, she lent me a couple of books on China and Chinese culture. So I went and taught English out there for a year, and then got a yeah got various jobs out there. In the end, ended up like studying Mandarin in the mornings and then working in the afternoons at various hotel magazines, travel magazines, events magazines, that kind of thing. um, and yeah, was ended up moving to Chengdu in the southwest and editing one of the magazines out there for the last couple of, I was there for about 5 years in total. And then yeah, when I came back, um, it was like right in the middle of the financial crisis. So publishing was going through its own moment, right? The internet was completely gutting the model. Classifieds were a big thing back in the day, but yeah, not anymore. Um, you know, I remember hearing some wild stat about how much Accountancy Age was making from classifieds alone. Back in the day, I mean, millions a year. Wild, but unthinkable in these days. But yeah, so I had various jobs when we came back from China, and businesses kept folding. People, kept being made redundant and things, and so eventually, I pitched up at Accounting Web in 2015. Obviously, with my previous knowledge, I was able to sort of slot in there relatively well. And I was lucky enough to sort of get a couple of promotions. And yeah, long story short, for the last 4 years, I've been working as a technology editor there.
Cool. So when you were back in China, so you started teaching English, and then you mentioned like English was the subject you enjoyed at school. Like, was there a desire then, and while you were working as an accountant before, was there a desire that you would want to get into editing? Like, how did the editor style role come out once you when you were in China?
I didn't really know anyone in publishing. You don't know what you don't know. Like, I knew I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to sort of express myself in that way. But I didn't really know how to approach things. Looking back, like, sure, I think the straightforward career option for a lot of journalists then was to just go and get work experience at the local paper and that kind of thing. I don't know. I was a total space cadet. I think I just wandered around with my head in the clouds and just hoped that something might fall in my lap. And it only really took realizing like you're on the career ladder now. This is this is how it's going to be for the next 40 years. If you don't get your act together, I think that was the kick up the backside that I needed. I mean, don't get me wrong, the teaching, I mean, in China was, yeah, I was a terrible teacher. But actually, it it was a means to an end, away into the country, away into the culture, and um, a fantastic way to sort of learn the language, learn about the people by sort of being there.
Okay. I mean, I suspect you were actually a very good teacher. Since you've been with Accounting Web, and I know you had the brief like interlude with ICAW Insight, you've built like a brand of credibility, trust, reliability, I'd say. And like, what do you reckon's contributed to that? Like, you can be quite self-deprecating as you were there. Is it that like humility that you have? What do you think it is?
I don't know. I just think maybe being a cynical Generation X, uh, we sort of struggle with blowing our own trumpets too much. But yeah, I think particularly particularly around the technology side, you're right. I mean, I did go up. I was editorial lead for Accounting Web for a few years, had a bit of a tantrum, and left. I was at ICAW when I don't know if do you remember Economia, the magazine you used to get? Yeah, yeah. So that was done through a sort of separate agency, as it were, and that agency lost the contract, and another agency got it. Boring agency chat. Sorry, but I think the idea was to bring everything under one roof as ICAW Insights, and so I was the sort of digital lead on that, and I think it was felt that my digital experience would be helpful you know, going towards a more sort of digital first approach. So I did that for 2 years, broadly straddling a lot of the COVID and lockdown stuff. So as you can imagine, it was a fairly intense time, some very, very long days. But yeah, I think once lockdown had finished, the CEO at the time at ICAW was very keen on us all coming back to the office. I live in Bristol and wasn't wild about spending 3 days at Moorgate Place in London. So, yeah, I decided at that point that my future lay elsewhere, and I was lucky enough. I didn't burn my bridges at Accounting Web, in spite of my best efforts, and so yeah, I was lucky enough to be welcomed back on the technology side of things.
Cool, cool. I'm keen to get into like the accounting tech industry broadly, and then maybe you can share just to start us off, like how are you seeing things right now? Like, what's your general take? What's your feeling? Yeah, and then we can go from there.
So I think I was interested in technology specifically because it's such a noisy place for accountants. Um, and there wasn't really any sort of one voice that stood out for me as being independent. There are a lot of vendors making noise in a lot of spaces and doing great work, yourselves included. But and there are some pretty dubious posts on LinkedIn that I see that probably should be tagged as an ad but aren't. There are these sort of fairly underhand practices that go on. I mean, obviously, Accounting Web is funded by advertisers, but hopefully, we make it clear where a piece of content or a webinar or an event is being sponsored. So there, that is what it is. I mean, if like one of the you know one of my bones of contention with the accounting world was that I felt it should be a sort of pay to play model, like the FT. But my superiors disagreed, and that's why it's their decision. I was just on the editorial side of things. But yeah, so I think generally AI has come in, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a bit more, but it's really amped up the noise as well. There are so many things that have just been, I mean, particularly in the initial wave of ChatGPT, Claude, everything like that rolling out. A lot of stuff was just packaged up and rebadged. Things that have been going, machine learning, like OCR scanning apps that could do auto coding and stuff. Things have been around for years. Suddenly they're rebadged. It's like, hey, everyone, we're doing AI too, and so it's really hard. And I think my role, as I see it anyway, is just to try and raise the level of education around there in a way that's hopefully accessible, uses plain English, like doesn't resort to the kind of tech jargon you see. I mean, a lot of the press releases I get are just total word salads that you just have to try and decipher. Just like, okay, who's this for? Like, what does this do? Um, and sometimes you ask people, like, "Oh, it's for everyone." You're like, no, dude, is it practice? Is it industry? Like, big firm, small firm. Like, I'm not saying you have to pick one, but try and narrow it down a bit. And the very best products that have come along are the ones that can do that.
What would you say are the most, you mentioned like maybe it's a lot of noise and people like needing education. Like what are the common misconceptions you're seeing right now with AI tech that's coming out?
What's been really interesting has been the reaction to it. I think the last real big tech leap forward was the sort of desktop to cloud 10, 15 years ago. And people have very specific worries about that. People worried about data security. Fine. Like I totally get that. With AI, it's been more emotional. And I think people have very strong feelings either way. Either it's incredible and you're going to have this one person unicorn accounting firm with one puppet master and his hundreds of agents sort of doing everything behind the scenes, or it's going to be the accounting apocalypse and it's just going to wipe out everyone's jobs. And I don't think it's that simple. But I think the narrative, I think particularly because these products have cut through into the mainstream in a way that cloud computing really didn't. And accounting regularly, they post those lists of jobs that are going to be made redundant by AI, and accounting's always up the top, right? But the people who are doing it never, like, there's never any nuance to this. It's just like, okay, what are you talking about? A tax accountant? Are you talking about financial reporting here? Are you auditors? What are we saying here? But there's none of that nuance that's available. You wonder if the people doing the studies have ever actually met an accountant or not. So
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
There's a OpenAI released this quite cool thing to be fair. So you know how we have evaluations that measure if AI is doing specific tasks well or not. And then when we release new models, we measure them against the evaluations. They have something called GDP val. So it's like an evaluation for like GDP. And that's got lots of modules in it, but one of them is accounting. And it's like finance and accounting. And it has like 5 questions and they are very broad and not very specific to individual tasks. So I think when like this wider industry is speaking about accounting, that I guess is maybe a lens at how maybe unnuanced they're thinking about it.
yeah. I think a lot of the time it's bookkeeping that they're trying to say, and even then, like, bookkeeping is a tough job. There are a million, as you guys know, there are a million and one different variances on where you should be coding stuff and how you should be coding stuff. So, it really does take subject matter experts to sort of delve into this. If you're coding stuff to the wrong place, it can have, potentially catastrophic impacts. So, yeah, I do. I do think it is. It's fascinating looking at the people. I mean, even the founder of Monzo came out last week and said that AI was going to kill income tax in 5 years. Which, I mean, he's after a bit of coverage. Presumably, he's got something to hawk. So yeah, it's a good way of
I
doing it,
was
I guess.
I was going to ask you about Tom Tom Blomfield and yeah, what he mentioned on the rest of his money about not paying any income tax. I don't know what that means for MTD for ITSA. It might be in his prediction. I guess it'd be a short-lived project.
Mm.
But yeah, I think Tom is a genuine person, and I suspect he is reasoning through a conclusion that he's thought through. Like, what was your take on it in terms of like, can you see flaws in the logic there?
I think there's no doubt that AI will impact the labour market. I mean, if I think about tech progression, if I think about what I was doing in those finance departments in the 90s, right, where the paper would arrive in an internal envelope with my name on it, I'd get out the paper, I'd cross out my name and pop it in a folder, and then I'd just take these pieces of paper and key them into fairly rudimentary databases all day. Now the idea of taking a picture, I'm, I'm afraid that a few people in 2026 still do it that way, and that's fine. It's their business; they can do it like that. Today, the ability to sort of literally take a picture of a receipt and to have all the information sucked up into the system and automatically coded. I mean, that's the dream. So I think it will affect things, but I think it's a misreading, to be honest. Is that classic line graph from the 80s, from I think it's the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, when spreadsheets first arrived and caused a major panic with accountants. I remember my mum trying to get into. She'd obviously trained on the paper ledgers, and moving to, like, she would literally check the spreadsheets calculations with her own calculator. And that was fairly wild. But I think all predictions said accountants and bookkeepers, the number of jobs was going to go down. Whereas actually, I think bookkeeping stabilized, maybe sort of a few more jobs. The number of accountants actually went up because they were able to be more efficient and sort of work through in different areas, apply their numerical analytical skills to different parts of the business. And I think the answer is we just don't know. If you'd have said to me when I left school, there'll be these big jobs called social media managers, where they'll manage the sort of comms. I'd have thought you were completely crazy, because Facebook hadn't even invented. Facebook, Twitter, or X hadn't been invented. So I I think I think based on the available evidence, I can see how he has reached that conclusion. I just don't agree with it.
It's definitely ruffled a few feathers. What do you think about junior jobs in this line? So um, big firms are slimming down the number of juniors they're hiring. Presumably, we will have some agents doing some of the tasks that juniors were doing. But is there a junior role in the future that does different tasks? How are we going to train the future CFOs and partners? What's your take? Are they seeing it wrong, these big firms?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think definitely the big four are slimming down. Whether they had too many to begin with, I don't know. Like, a lot of this stuff, a lot of this stuff is being outsourced. I think that's the elephant in the room that no one really wants to talk about. That the number of juniors has been reducing, but a lot of that work is going to different countries, and so is it AI, or is it outsourcing? But I think if AI, I mean, if products like yourselves, if some of the major LLMs get their act together and produce work that can produce tools, sorry, that can cut down on some of the manual work, I think that's good. I like it. It would hopefully attract more people, a, a varied sort of sweep of people into the profession, rather than just those who are just literally focused on the numbers. I mean, firms are sending sort of trainees to the sort of work in hospitality jobs now, aren't they, to try and up their people skills? And so, I think there will be a junior role. It'll just look slightly different. Training will be a really interesting one. Um, I mean, like certainly any accounting course I ever encountered, in the 90s, there was an awful lot of Sage involved. Obviously, they were the sort of dominant player at the time, but um, whether you whether you sort of teach a number of different models, whether you are just teaching theory and letting people loose on them. I really like the ICAW's approach with that sort of AI lab where they've got people involved. Trainees can sort of go in and kick the tires on various tools. I thought that was a really good step in the right direction from them. I know that since I was there, certainly they've undergone an awful lot of change. A lot of the old faculties and departments have either gone or merged, and new ones have arrived. And I think that that initiative is definitely one of the good ones.
Yeah, agreed. They're definitely grabbing this with both hands, I think, from like a comms education and actually doing stuff as well. Yeah,
Mm.
I think it's really impressive what they're doing. Um, not but I'm a member myself, so I'm not. So do you
Yeah,
think ultimately the number of junior jobs will decrease? Thinking back to that line graph you mentioned with the US, like do you think it will decrease over time, or we're just in a phase now where we're figuring out what the new set of tasks juniors should do is?
yeah. I think it's impossible to say. To be perfectly honest, I hope it won't. And I hope that there will be. Like, I don't speak to many accountants who say that they're bored, that they're kicking around, that they haven't got much to do, right? There's just no work on at the moment, is there? Every accountant I speak to is completely slammed, and so the ability to sort of churn through more work and get to some of the projects, get to some of the things or the service lines they might want to open or what have you. That's great. Let experienced, intelligent, educated people, letting them loose on new projects can only be a good thing, I think.
Yeah, yeah. The only hints of idleness I've heard have been the junior roles at the large audit firms.
That's
I
interesting.
understand. Yeah, I understand that that has been a difficult skill set to deploy onto the current structure of how audits are done.
Mm, mm. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, talking to I got chatting at a conference. This I think it was an 80-year-old who'd been a partner at Pete Marwick, now KPMG, and he he was just saying like he'd worked in London in the 60s, and generally if there was nothing to do, I think they had the British Steel audit, so they just go down there and sort of punch in their timesheet. Down at British Steel, even though weren't really doing anything. I think it's a tale as old as time, I think. And hopefully management skills, management communications can sort of see people through that period and help deploy people into different areas.
How do you think the shape of the accounting firm is changing? So we're seeing influx of PE and consolidation, acquisitions, but then also I'm definitely seeing on the ground new people leaving firms and setting up their own practices. They think they can build like this tech enabled practice, they can offer a better service to clients, move faster, especially as things are changing. So we're seeing maybe like a fragmentation, but then also a
Mm.
consolidation at the same time. How's the shape of the firm going to change? What's your lens?
Yeah, I see it a little bit like the supermarkets. You've got your sort of high end ones, your Waitroses and Marks and Spencers and what have you, and then your sort of Aldi's and your Lidl's, and then I fear for the ones in the middle, to be honest, like established. regional firms with the oak paneling and the portraits. I feel like they're the ones with the data on, your partner's desktop computer, at home, or a disk drive or a filing cabinet or whatever. Like, it's very, very hard to enact. It's not impossible, but it's very hard to sort of digitally transform those. And generally, people are leaving those. I mean, we saw it a lot during lockdown period where I think a lot of people just went out on their own. The idea, I mean, it, it's kind of wild thinking sort of 20, 25 years ago, where to set up an accounting firm, you needed premises, you needed servers, you needed, I don't know, 3 or 4 staff, receptionists, all the rest of it. You needed all those things. Is a massive outlay. Whereas today's world, you just need a laptop, a bank account, and a couple of subscriptions, and away you go. So there is that opportunity. At the same time, like chatting to people like Tax Assist, they're sort of picking up these people on the way down. Like, not all new businesses succeed, right? I think they've got like a 70% failure rate, haven't they? So, um, I think that some succeed, some don't, but the ones that are the ones that are sort of take off are able to be a bit more agile, to be a bit more flexible, and sort of deploy new technology in a much better way. So yeah, that part of it's really exciting for me.
About at the consolidation layer, like, do you think this is good? Maybe like less partnerships with shorter term incentives, or longer term incentives with PE, or do you think actually this brings some bad incentives into the market?
Like everything, I think there are, like you said, the partner model is fairly antiquated, and I think particularly younger generations are figuring out, like, why on earth should I slog my guts out for 20 years in the hope of making partner, with no guarantee, and then you're sort of putting the cash in yourself, in the hope of extracting it in the future. So it is kind of wild, but yeah, I mean, the idea of sort of private equity sort of buying it, stacking. I did a recent piece on sort of consolidating tech stacks, and spoke to a load of um, CIOs, CTOs at larger firms, and it sounds incredibly difficult. I think ultimately, in theory, it's a lovely idea, taking your tech stack and landing it on the firm you've just acquired, but in practice, it is it's a really, really tough ask. You do fear a little bit. I mean, the nature of private equity is that they're looking to smush these practices together, roll it up nicely, and then sell it on for a bigger amount. So that's what they're going to do. Whether that's good for the profession, whether that's good for clients, time will tell. I'm not convinced myself, but perhaps the ones they're acquiring, you know, might have been right for the taking anyway. I'm not sure.
How are you seeing the vendor market today? Like I said, you've got a really great perspective where you get to see all of the new things vendors come up with, how they're communicating it to the market, and thinking just about the UK market as well. How are you seeing it right now?
Yeah, I think we're coming through this making tax digital phase of things. I've always found it, again, talking about noise, it's a very noisy program. MTD, like, you go to any conference, like last year, it's literally just MTD and AI, which is quite hard. When, like, the year after MTD was delayed, it was a really nice conference season because I could go around and hear about all the new little bits and pieces around workflow, automation, practice management, lots of these things that people were doing. Whereas, yeah, MTD just sucks all the oxygen out of the room. I think, in the same way that accounting firms are consolidating, I think we are seeing now a lot of vendor consolidation. Now, I think that's uh, partly due to, I think the cloud accounting very much had this sort of explosion of third party apps. I mean, I guess similar to smartphones, where you can download the apps onto your phone, the likes of Zero, QuickBooks, etc. Getting these apps in an app store and sort of plugging them in was great. But I think app fatigue is a real thing. We did a study on it a couple of years ago where I think a large proportion of people were actually looking to reduce their tech stack because it was quite hard, if a couple of apps in your app stack announce price increases off the back of each other, over a couple of weeks. What does that do to your firm's margin? Do you pass that cost onto your clients? Do you get them to just subscribe direct? I think there are a lot of pricing implications in there as well, and integrations. Yeah, it's never quite fully taken off, even in the API era. So, yeah, I think there is a move towards more under one roof. We're definitely seeing that with all the vendors. We've had zero payroll for years, but zero tax. They've obviously got their new AI in place as well. QuickBooks has done a similar thing, practice management or its various sort of accounting suites. So yeah, I think that they're bundling that up. I think you can't really get away from it. The all-in-one products in like individually, if you take all their offerings, they're not as good as the point solutions. But it's just whether their customers are willing to put up with it. Just to have that one bill landing on the doormat as opposed to 15 or 20. Yeah, it's certainly we're in a time of flux, and I think what gives me a bit of hope is seeing how entrepreneurial types are deploying AI to build their own apps. I was sat conference last week. I was sat by Zoe Whitman, who's the CEO of Hey Monica, like a sort of work experience app for bookkeepers. And she had Claude Code up, sort of spinning up a new module, and it was kind of wild. Just sort of watching someone, obviously with a great idea. She's a qualified accountant and has run the six-figure bookkeeper network for ages, but just watching her just do that, because in the past you'd have had to pay a development team, an absolute fortune to put together something like that. Whereas, yeah, just a sort of monthly subscription enables that. Or Tim Foraker, who I think Counting Up, I think he was the founder of, and ClearBooks as well, with the recent corporate tax, that the sort of free filing has closed now. He was able to sort of on his own, rather than sort of taking in funding or sort of raising it himself through loans or whatever. He was able to just bootstrap, again using Claude Code, and building his own app to do that, and it's sort of expanding that out. So at the bottom end, there are sort of signs that the conversation's moving on.
Yeah, one thing I really wanted to ask you about is, so if people start to use a single point of AI contact, say like a ChatGPT for business or a Claude Cowork, for example, do you think people will want to build their own things at scale and that have staying power? Um, do you see that lasting? I think you're right to mention like this entrepreneurial spirit, but what about like the maintenance of that? Like, do you think this is a something here to stay?
And I think that's why I'm very keen. You'll hopefully notice in every article, I do about new products, I will ask. I mean, I remember when Engager, the practice management software, hit the market. I sort of said, "Oh, so yeah, when are you selling to Iris?" Then it's like, "Oh no, we'd never sell up," But I think, and a couple of years later, I mean, they didn't sell to Iris; they sold to TaxCalc instead. So I think that flywheel is actually getting faster now that people people come into the market. They're solving a genuine problem that needs solving for people. They pull in a decent number of customers, and and then a big vendor comes in and makes them an offer they can't refuse. I think that's undoubtedly that's kind of a risk that customers have to take. Like quite often now, if I'm walking around, I think because of my videos, people sort of recognize me as someone who'd be keen to talk about accounting tech. So, people walk up, oh, I'm thinking about using app X or app Y. Do you think they're going to be sold? Do you think they're going to be moving on? So I think there's an element of sort of weighing up um, that decision in your mind of just like if they sell in 2 years, 3 years, how much of a pain is that actually going to be? I mean, you're right to talk about the maintenance things. It's all well and good to spin up an app and to sort of keep it, but to keep it going with the requisite level of support. I think. I mean, ultimately, it can't be a hobby. Like it needs to be your full time business, doesn't it? So yeah.
Yeah, one thing that is particularly interesting about people who are building their own things with AI is it's a great opportunity for vendors to go and learn. Like that's evidence of someone trying to solve their own problem and they're trying to build something. And I think a lot of the time that should sit as an external workflow that maybe is very specific to them, but oftentimes there's probably some hints of maybe something broader, a broader feature or product that they're looking to build.
Yeah, yeah. Why are you doing that? Why can't you do that in your existing tech stack? Like, yeah, it is funny, isn't it?
Do you think that we'll be interacting with our accounting software through a general AI tool like a Claude or ChatGPT Enterprise, where we've got lots of those different apps plugged into them, like there's your Zero, so your Ledger, and maybe some other apps as well? Can you see that happening? There seems to be this question mark right now after the Zero Claude partnership. It's like, how are we going to be interfacing with things?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by these partnerships. The sort of zero anthropic. I went to NetSuite's conference in London a few weeks back, and I was lucky enough to get some time with the NetSuite founder, who the the grandfather of cloud accounting, if you want to call him that, Evan Goldberg. And I sort of said, isn't this a bit like letting the fox into the hen house? He was very bullish about it. He's like, no, no, this is the point of truth. Like, fine, you can have your AI around the edge, but this is where the data will come from. So whether he's right or not, I'm kind of fascinated by the releases. I think Perplexity released one last week, didn't they? That was just essentially like a sort of data health check, where you plug in Zero to Perplexity via this MCP connection, and it sort of takes the data out, and you can sort of chop it up any way you like. That was really interesting. Perhaps AI is coming for a few of those third party apps right now, but yeah, I think what Evan Goldberg said was really interesting was that, you know, the vendors, it's not just software, it's the support, it's the workflows, it's the automations, it's the relationships, it's everything around there as well. We had that recent massive dip in SaaS company valuations, the SaaS apocalypse, as it was dubbed, and perhaps that was a sort of repricing that was overdue, maybe for those shares. But I think that for as long as that the accounting software can remain that sort of heart, that point of truth, then I think it sort of insulates itself from some of that.
I think up till now it's been to switch ledgers is quite a big thing. Like
Yeah.
people would be like, oh, how do I move everything between it? And especially just training people on a new software. Like these ledgers can be very different to use. Even having just used like NetSuite, QuickBooks, Zero, even SAP, etc. Like very, very different from a change management perspective. But if we're using these softwares through like a one portal, do you think that reduces the switching costs and maybe like devalues the ledger in some way? Do they become like almost commoditized?
Yeah, that could be one way they get them, couldn't it? Yeah, that is interesting. But yeah, I guess it is one of the one of the great hopes I had, to be perfectly honest, for AI, that the era of desktop software that lasted a lot longer, and I think it's why it's so hard to sort of prize people away from their copies of Sage 50, because a lot of it is so individualized, and people, it's so ingrained in people. And cloud, I think, was a touch more rigid. I think there was less ability for personalization, and I guess that's why people sought out these apps. And I'd kind of hoped that AI would offer you the ability to sort of spin up uh, some of your own ways, some of your own workflows, some of your ways to interact with the system. That kind of thing. I think was really I, I've got a lot of hope for. Whether that's misplaced or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, the idea of interacting, I think a lot of software is already trying to go that way, trying to head it off at the pass. I mean, NetSuite, for example, has this sort of Ask Oracle function that is literally just a top bar where instead of the sort of GUI menu that we know and love, the sort of drop downs, file, report, whatever, you just literally type in, yeah, just give me an age data report for the last, whatever. And it just goes away and does that. It sort of recognizes your commands, as it were. So I I feel like they are aware of that to a certain extent. Whether or not they can build AI better than some of these LLM providers, I'm not sure about that, but perhaps they can build it. Perhaps they can build an accounting workflow better.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the question is how do like I think there'll be some workflows that um, these model providers can get their heads around and could build and lean themselves more to AI. But then I guess this comes into the question of like moats, like what are the accounting specific moats for all providers? Like what are you doing that um, OpenAI or Claude or Anthropic would have no business
Yeah.
doing? I guess that's what I'm trying to tease out. It's like what are these things that are untouchable from the model providers?
Yeah. And I think it's the same for accountants in a certain extent, isn't it? That a lot of that work may well be. I mean, we saw it in the recent tax return season. AI, the toothpaste is out of the tube. Clients are using AI. They're asking their tax questions. It's just less friction than booking an appointment with your accountant. Sorry. And so, yeah, I think it is. It's a fascinating time in that respect. In terms of your moat, I think trust and accountability have to be big ones. There's that famous IBM slogan, isn't there? A computer isn't accountable. I'd say that's a huge one. Uh, I think relationships are massive as well. If you have an established relationship with a client, I think that goes an awful long way. And that sort of difficult conversation around your client's kitchen table about an unexpected tax bill, I'm not sure. Perhaps eventually a computer will be able to have that, put the virtual arm around the shoulder, but I'm not sure that'll happen anytime soon. So, yeah, I think, trust, accountability, relationships, reassurance, and I think that way accountants need to lean into that aspect of it.
Yeah. Definitely one interesting development from outside the industry in that regard has been 11 Labs. So 11 Labs are a voice agent lab and have really successfully been able to develop models of their own ahead of the existing model providers. And they're a European-based startup as well. So that's a great success. They've introduced insurance for voice agents. So a way to create insurance and accountability of their agents acting in the wild. That I thought was interesting, and it did make me think about how that would how whether that matters for accounting.
Yeah, it could well be the next boom in PII. Yeah, yeah, you're insuring your model against insuring your model against a tax mistake. Yeah, seen. I think I mentioned it last video or a couple of videos ago. This sort of massive boom in. I think there was someone who was studying the number of disciplinaries against lawyers for introducing AI into depositions and things like that. You know, fake cases, things like that. And we've seen a couple of pretty high profile examples from tax cases recently. So you know, it's on the way, but I think there's some fairly crude attempts to use AI so far. So yeah.
Do you think broadly that AI has a place at giving advice? And I think about advice in, I think there's different types of insurable advice in the market. There's financial advice, isn't there? Like, I think you should put your money here. I think you should do this. There's tax advice, and then there can be like general tactical advice based on like the context of a business. Like, across those, do you think AI has a place?
Yeah, I think government needs to, like, talking about tax advice, for example. You know, Nick Nick Stobbs, who had founded Tax on Demand, and I'm struggling to remember the name of his new company. Oh, it's disappointing. But yes, he that that was quite interesting because it's sort of pulling data.
Syntax.
Syntax. Thank you, Sam. Yes. Sorry, Nick. And yeah, pulling data in and then sort of cross matching it against all the tax reliefs and grants that are potentially available. Like that, that kind of thing to me, conducting a sort of whole scale tax review as a first sweep before you sort of actually check, like, oh, hold on, are they actually eligible for that grant you flagged, or is this a misfire? But actually, I think that side of things is interesting. I think the problem lies in the tax code. I mean, it just being wildly um so wildly overwritten, and um, with all the sort of various exemptions. I mean, with the best will in the world, I don't know if an LLM is going to be able to tell the difference between strawberry and chocolate Nesquik and whether they should be zero or standard rated or not. But yeah, it is one of those things where a little bit of simplification might go a long way to help with the efficiency of these things. And so, yeah, I think transparency comes down to a lot of it as well. How have you? I can see you've come up with that answer, but what have you got to back it up? If it's able to come up, show its workings, as it were,
Yes.
then I don't see why not.
Yeah, yeah, explainability, and just like you'd expect from a great human accountant, right? Like, you
Yeah.
arrive somewhere, how did you show your workings? We taught that all
Mm,
through school, show your workings.
yeah.
You mentioned about like the fallibility of the models, hallucinations, and some issues that have cropped up, high profile ones. What do you think we and other software vendors can learn from human processes of, because humans, we pinpoint and target these models, but humans hallucinate and lie as well. Like, what can we learn from how we've constructed human processes and human controls and checks and balances in order to start reducing these hallucinations?
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? We always hold the new piece of technology to a much higher standard than exists from there. So, and I think that's why a lot of the technology is fairly well suited. I mean, in the same way that spreadsheets took over from your paper ledgers, that the paper ledgers, if you made a mistake in one part, then you had to sort of rub it out, tip X it out, move over, and sort of make the corrections in other parts as well. So the idea that, yeah, you could just make the change and the formulas would nicely flow. I mean, it makes total sense for a deterministic system, but yeah, I think it's, I don't know, because these systems work in such a different way from ours. It's difficult, isn't it? Sort of trying to anthropomorphize them and sort of say, oh, well, I mean, admittedly, they've been trained on human output, so it will contain sort of human errors and human biases and things like that. But yeah, in terms of how to sort of cut out the hallucinations, I think just adding adding those checks and balances in just seems a sensible place to start.
Yeah, yeah. Like just like a human accounting firm is non-deterministic humans with deterministic software built around them. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, these AI agents, which obviously are non-deterministic at source, should have verification built in. Like they can use deterministic tools as well. I think I'm optimistic on the hallucination front. Do you think that you mentioned there about anthropomorphizing models, and that creates a lot of risk, right? Because if you start to create this persona around a model, we tend to extrapolate and think, oh, if it can do that, it might be able to do other things. With that in mind, of the AI vendors that you're seeing out there, who do you think is communicating what their AI is doing well? You mentioned that education gaps as well. Can you understand like what narratives and what tactics vendors are using that you think is being successful and you think is a right way to go about things?
I mean, obviously yourself, Sam. That's a briefcase. I think that like it's a product to solve a problem. And you communicate in accountant's language. I think Sage is doing it very well. Sage seems to be applying it to specific parts of the workflow, whether that's month-end close with the sort of intact product that they've got, or I think they're sort of rolling out to a few of their other um, larger solutions as well, or they're making tax digital agent. They're sort of saying, okay, it's this problem we're trying to solve, rather than making AI the headline. I think, in my view, any good piece of technology kind of moves into the background. It's like a good football referee. You don't really notice that it's doing its job well. you know, you're obviously there. You have to check the outputs, but you're sort of there thinking, okay, great, yeah, on to the next task, rather than, oh, this is a bit weird. We've got the AI whirring around in the background here. I hope it's all right. So yeah, and I think we're still very early on in this sort of AI era, as it were. If you compare it to recent tech developments. So it'll be interesting to see whether AI does sort of slowly move into the background, or continues to sort of take center stage.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because like some of the best AI that has been used over the last 10 years is like Netflix's recommendation algorithm, Google search, YouTube's recommendation algorithm. Like we use those all the time and we don't think, oh, I'm interacting with AI now. I need to think
Yeah,
about hallucinations. It just works. It just shows us what we want and we roll with it. And if you're building new software, yeah, like why does it have to be AI? Like, sure, AI is using that and should be used within it and should be transparent about it. But
yeah.
the software either works for the firm or the business, or it doesn't. Um, how it gets there maybe isn't as important.
on our on our forum yesterday, we had a howl of outrage from one of our readers about the number of AI articles on the site, and it's kind of fair enough. I think 5 out of 12 on the homepage were had AI in the headline. My sort of gentle pushback to that was that, I mean, it wasn't. They weren't all articles saying AI is amazing. Go and plug yourself into the internet immediately, kind of thing. It's I think, whether you like it or not, it's what people are talking about. A lot more people are at the beginning of their AI journey. Sure, there are people on the cutting edge who, have spun up their own budget GPTs and what have you, and that's fantastic. The profession needs pioneers, but at the same time, there is a thirst, a demand for information about these systems. And of those five, I'd say a couple were sort of putting AI in its sort of rightful spot at the moment. Whether it's talking about probabilistic versus deterministic systems, or slightly putting Mr. Blomfield's comments in place, or emphasizing the role of an accountant in an AI powered world. So yeah, I think it's one of those, you know, if we don't talk about it, doesn't mean it doesn't go away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tom, what are you most interested and excited about right now from either what firms are doing, from, like in practice and in vendors? What are you most interested by?
Um, I'm fascinated to see what's next at the moment. We've had a few false dawns with AI at the moment. In previous iterations, who can forget dear old Sage Peg, or I remember one of the early ones, Unit 4's Wanda. All of these, I presume, are now sort of uh, patrolling the dusty corridors of warehouses somewhere, or long since retired. But you know, is this is this a thing? I obviously read a lot around the AI era, and there are real AI naysayers out there, and a lot of them talk to the economic model behind a lot of these businesses, whether that's OpenAI or Anthropic, that at the moment, I mean, and this is totally normal, by the way, for a new technology, but at the moment the prices are kept artificially low. Your £20 a month ChatGPT subscription actually in reality should probably be about 220, 240. What's presumably at some stage, these companies that are passing round this sort of 200 billion sort of IOU around a few different places. Eventually the music's got to stop, and either the prices go up, or the sort of product goes down. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens when the music stops in that regard, and what the profession looks like when that happens.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely interested to see how much attention those big providers pay to us specifically in accounting. Like you said, Perplexity working with QuickBooks and Xero, Claude's partnership with Xero. Yeah, how concerned or interested about us are they?
Yeah, like the NetSuite founder said, "Oh, I don't think anyone at Anthropic's sitting around thinking about how to disrupt accountants." And mate, perhaps he's right. Perhaps he's right. But I think it's so tempting for these tech guys that just look at accounting and say, it's just numbers, isn't it? Yeah, it's just codified rules. It's just numbers. We can disrupt that. Nice big juicy market. And actually the problem is in the nuances. The problem is in the legislation. There are so many of these things that if you get it wrong, it's not like a marketing blog that you can delete. This is someone's tax file, or this is someone's financial report. These have genuine real world consequences. So I think it's part of the reason why accounting has been slightly slower, um, off the mark compared to other professions, law, for example.
You mentioned the pricing there as well. So a lot of individuals are paying for monthly subscriptions, normally just to get a bundle of use, and they might hit like rate limits within that if they're super users. And then on the software side, we've typically paid as firms for maybe seats or per client. And some people are talking about like usage-based billing. Like, can you see procuring software, like how we do that needing to change? And then I guess that also leads into how firms are then charging for their services as well.
I think it comes down to education. Working out what the software does and how it fits in with you and your workflow. If you sit there on your sandcastle, hoping the tide's not going to come in and sweep you away, then good luck with that. But actually getting out there and finding out how these products work. The pricing is subtly different. You had all this stuff about token maxing recently, didn't you? At Uber and Meta and the likes. And, I'm not suggesting accounting firms go out and try token maxing, but, it's a different pricing model, right? I think certain providers, sorry, are, I think, while their AI offerings are free at the moment, I think behind the scenes they are exploring usage based pricing, and that's going to be a big old it's going to be a big old shock for a profession that's actually grown fairly used to getting that monthly bill. If your junior's been absolutely hammering the AI tool behind the scenes, then if you get a software bill of a couple of thousand, then that's going to certainly open a few eyes in your practice.
Yeah. Last question I wanted to ask you about was just how you see the UK accounting space generally, like the community, the attitude. Going to Fab for me a month or so ago was like really nice. Like that was my first big conference. I got to see how everyone interacts with each other, like the great relationship. Like, what's your take on that? I guess what are you proud of about it, and then maybe where could it improve a bit?
Yeah, Fab was great. We have dabbled in the accounting web started as a digital only forum back in 1997 and has kind of grown out of that into the new site. We've got our Accounting Excellence Awards that we run sort of September, October, which are great again, sort of bringing the profession in. But, there are only a certain number of firms who will enter awards. Whereas with Fab, in terms of conferences, you can get a lot more people into the big exhibition hall in Birmingham, and so it was fantastic. I think I mean I mentioned the amount of work earlier. I think because there's enough work to go around for everyone and more. It is still a very collegiate profession that people are willing to put themselves out there to say, oh, hey, here's a problem I had. Here's how I solved it. And since Fab, like quite a few people have approached me with different ideas about sessions we could have or ways to solve problems. And that's fantastic. I think it's still a profession with I don't know if it's a lack of confidence, a chip on the shoulder. I'm not sure. That you know the lawyers get the big moments in the Hollywood films. I know we've literally had a couple of films called The Accountant, but I'm not sure how many accountants actually run around shooting pump action shotguns and things like Ben Affleck. But yeah, and doctors save people's lives and things. So I think accountants often don't recognize the genuine difference that they make in people's lives, whether that's their client or in business and things. So yeah, I think it's a profession that needs to be a little bit more chest out, personally.
Well, I think that's a great place to finish, Tom.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sam.